Welcome home. We are WNST. Castle Baltimore. Baltimore Positive. We had such a beautiful Baltimore Positive day on Wednesday. Mark Viviano joined us at Coco's. Mike Rosigliano joined us to start the football season, to kick it off. And we're going to talk some football around here for sure. But the baseball team still's playing. And if there was ever a night, Luke Jones, for the baseball team to take a night off and let the football team either win or lose or do whatever they are. And if you're listening on Friday or see this on Friday before the baseball game, a little breather, you just think they have to beat the worst team in the history and all that. And, my dude Suarez, that's my guy. And they didn't hit the ball again. Which way are you going? Bad start or they didn't hit the ball or both?
Both. I mean, Albert Suarez didn't pitch very well. He gave up 3 home runs. He's not someone who typically gives up many long balls, so that was a little uncharacteristic to say the least. The velo was maybe down a tick, not overly concerning, not way down, anything like that. But we've been talking about Albert Suarez and his workload and his background and how far he's come to get back to the major leagues after 7 years in, I don't want to say the baseball wilderness because I don't want to be too disparaging of international baseball, but it's not Major League Baseball, right? So we've been talking about
like the White Sox.
well, sure, yeah. I didn't even mean to do that, but the point was, I mean, he's worked a lot this year, and he's been so huge for them. He had a bad start. There's no question about it.
It had to happen, right? Like he's
right. And
how many? He hasn't had any of these all year. You picked a terrible night to stink. You know what I mean? Like, but that's the way it went, right?
Right. And it's baseball. And look, I joked about it on social media. I was texting with you earlier in the evening saying I've never seen a team this bad. The White Sox are markedly worse than the 2018 Orioles, the 1988 Orioles, the 2021 Orioles. I go through the list of the really bad teams that have played here, but it is baseball. It does only count for one loss. Maybe it should count for two, losing to the White Sox, but hey, the Yankees lost again in Arlington. They lose a series to the Rangers, the Orioles, even after their loss to the worst team maybe in the history of modern baseball. They're still in first place, and they have the top record in the AL, and everything is still sitting there for them. I mean,
so
I
they
think
could lose to the worst team in the history of Major League Baseball on September 4th and have a parade on November 4th. You're telling me there's still a chance. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I can't jump off the bridge about it. I just keep looking at this and seeing the significance of these Yankees games coming up.
Sure.
And if you could go up and win a couple or sweep, or, you can make a difference or not, but every day is going to make a difference. And I had Barry Bloom on this week to promote that. He's wearing his Yankees hat because that's his shtick at this point. He's 80 years old and been doing this forever, just trying to antagonize me. I said, I'm just glad to be antagonized by a Yankee hat again, because we couldn't even compete with them for all these years. But the notion that this team could catch fire in October, Rasig and I talked about it, Mark Viviano and I talked about it at length, being a baseball fan that he is and all that. I'm having a hard time being fatalistic about any of this, other than when you and I talk at length professionally as we do, that's problematic, right? I mean, it's problematic in the pitching side, but it's not going to decide their fate in game one of whatever that is. They're going to have a chance at this. You know what I mean? They're going to have a chance to set up pitching, to set up whatever their best options are in whatever their circumstances to try to go win a World Series in a couple of weeks. And that's because they didn't get swept last week. We've talked 2 weeks ago, like, oh my God, the Astros come in here and do a number, like none of that bad, awful stuff has happened. They're treading water as we kind of expected them to do, right?
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the number of injuries, specifically the number of pitching injuries, although Jordan Westberg, Ryan Mountcastle, Ramon Arias now, I mean, they've taken some hits on the position player side too. I mean, thank goodness Gunnar Henderson, who broke the single season club record for home runs by a shortstop on Wednesday night. I mean, Gunnar didn't want to lose to the White Sox. I'll say that much about Wednesday night's game. I mean, Gunnar swung the bat really well. But look, I'll keep saying this. Even if you doubt the Orioles and their ability to make a run in October, and we talk about the bullpen or the health of the starting rotation or the up and down nature of the offense, I'll continue to say, then who? Someone from the American League is making it to the World Series. Who do you love? Well, look at the Yankees. And we're talking about the Orioles losing to the White Sox. By the way, the Yankees lost to the White Sox several weeks back. It does happen. It is baseball. They have won somehow The White Sox have
They
won
did go a
32.
month without winning, though.
No
They're
doubt.
somewhere there.
Believe me, they're horrible. This is not me. I'm just, it's baseball. They've won 32 games somehow because they are woeful, but they were better than the Orioles on Wednesday night. So you give them credit and you give the Orioles their scorn for one night. But I'll continue to say this, whether we're talking about the Yankees. I mean, a month, a little over a month ago, we were talking about the upstart Boston Red Sox. They're 70-70, right? I mean, their playoff hopes are really kind of circling the drain. I mean, they're not out of it, but
It's such a
not looking good
baseball
for them.
thing for teams to fall apart after the All-Star break, right? Like that. Just every year, just like in the NFL, there's a couple of teams that start 8-3, that finish, whatever,
Yeah.
and that's just sort of the nature of scheduling. It's the nature of injuries,
Yeah.
and it's quite frankly the story of the Orioles have had 2 seasons, right? The first 70 games and the last 70 games. Like literally, they were a 600 team and they were a 500 team, and that's what they've been. And it's kind of like the crowds at Orioles game. People were bitching about the crowds on Wednesday night, and people are now on my Twitter at least, and who knows what this maniac that's running that thing is doing in this political season. But it's like the people that go when there are 10,000 people there like it when there's 10,000 people there, and they have a good time. They don't really want 40,000 there every night. The people that come, and the people when there's 40,000 there, they only come when there's 40,000 there to get a trophy or get a widget or a freebie or whatever, and that's their experience. Is standing in line for 2 hours to get some. There's strokes for different folks in that way, and I think there's the same thing here for what we're seeing in good season and bad season. When you lose these many key players, integral parts, you're a 500 team. Now, Arizona was all that last year. They play 700 baseball in October. That's all that matters if you can win 2 out of every 3 days in October. I keep sort of saying that in some sort of weird way, but I think they're capable of doing that against any of these American League teams. Even with Suarez, even if they have to. I'm not going to say they're going to start Kohler, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they're going to find 3 guys to pitch next month, and we're going to hope Westberg's back. And there's been like more good news than bad news. I don't want to say that because of Urias, but guys are coming back, right? Like you have some confidence being down there with a press badge, seeing people around. Katie Griggs, hello. That there is some motion toward a cavalry, right?
Yeah, there is. I mean, in fact, on Wednesday, the best news for the Orioles on Wednesday had nothing to do with what happened during the game, obviously, but Grayson Rodriguez threw a bullpen. Threw about 20 pitches, mixed in some off speed with his fastball, said he's feeling good. He's confident he's going to be back. I mean, obviously, it's not imminent, but he's on track to start a rehab assignment here in the not too distant future and then get back. You hope by, the next to last week of September, at least the last week of, the last 10 days of September where he can make a start or two. It's not going to be much more than that.
He's felt slow, right? It felt like he might be rehabbing now, right? When it happened, this has felt like, and maybe they're slow playing it because, like, let's be honest, they need him for game 2, right? I mean, or we're game something, right?
Well, it might be game 3 now, right? Because, Eflin has been so good where, Grayson Rodriguez, you don't necessarily need him to be the 2 if Eflin's going to be what Eflin has been, which, you could debate Eflin could be the 1 right now with Corbin Burns being a little more up and down. But look, I think when you're talking about a lat/teres strain, we're talking about the lat muscle. I said to you at the time, it's tricky. And as much as they were optimistic and they made clear that this wasn't the 3-month absence that he had a couple years ago in the minor leagues when he was on the cusp of being called up, early June of 22. But I wasn't at all convinced that, he's going to be back on the mound in 3 weeks either. This has played out about how I thought it would. And
right. If you can do it in 6 weeks or 8 weeks and you're not in peril of getting knocked out of the playoffs, let's go with 8 weeks, right? Like a little bit more like that, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I think some of this is also a pitcher can't pitch at less than 100% or
else
98%, right? If it's much worse than that, they're not going to be very good because that's
the same thing with a cornerback in football. If they can't run just a little bit, it's over. They can't play.
Right. You're talking a cornerback in football might be able to get away with a bump shoulder because you can put a harness in it. But if it's a leg or a foot or a knee, it's not going to be good. So, the margin for error between the best players in Major League Baseball and guys that are not very good it's not much. I mean, it really isn't. So you're kind of at the mercy of trying to just get him right physically. So, but he threw a bullpen. Danny Coulomb a couple of days ago threw to live hitters, live batting practice. Is feeling good. Again, not imminent because keep in mind he's been out since June. So again, he's another guy that's going to want to at least probably get a couple games of rehab, if not more than a couple. So late September, I get it.
Well,
Jacob
also
Webb
the
just had his
minor league
second
rehab
rehab
thing's
outing
weird
at
too, right?
Bowie.
Like we're getting into the point where you can't send guys down, right? Like to some degree.
Well, AAA, their season concludes September 22nd. So yeah, the clock's ticking. You have about 2 weeks, little over 2 weeks, right around there to get them in. There are other ways to, there are other ways to massage a rehab assignment. You can do sim games, you can do different things like that. You can have guys at Sarasota, whatever it is. But yeah, the clock's ticking, no doubt. I mean, but because I've talked about this a lot, Brandon Hyde talked about it earlier on this homestand that there's getting guys back healthy, and then there's they're back healthy, but you want them to be themselves, right? I mean, you don't want Jordan Westburg coming up and he's a shell of what he normally is because he hasn't had any at bats in 2 months and is healthy enough to play, but not healthy enough to thrive. I use that term a lot when we're talking about usually in the context of football and the Ravens and someone coming back from a torn ACL or an Achilles or something like that. And I always say there's healthy enough to play, but you want guys to be as close to healthy enough to thrive as they can be
You're not
because
thinking about
it,
your injury or feeling
it's
your injury or the
yeah,
relative sharpness that you have to have and the acuity. I mean, we're talking about Gunnar Henderson not being able to hit a fastball after taking 3 days off and the shadows coming in October. And he's perfectly healthy. You know what I mean? Trying to hit a fastball when you haven't. There's a whole different level of that for all of these guys that will
yeah,
come back, if they make it back. And the same thing from the pitching side of it, man, command, location,
oh yeah.
the precision to do what they do when you haven't done it for a little while. It's not like riding a bike in that way. And I think that's really hard for fans because all they see is the baseball card and the guy, and they say, "Oh, he's Grayson Rodriguez." Yeah, but he hadn't been able to pick up a baseball in a month. Like it's different.
Yeah, I think again, I'm using football because we tend to talk about injuries way more in football, right? And it's football season, and the Ravens are off to 2024
Don't worry,
out of the gate
baseball
and all
team gets
that.
hurt and everybody
But
gets hurt.
sure, but I think I've talked about this with people, even within the Ravens organization, even some football people. I think Madden, the video game that I know doesn't mean as much to you, but anyone even my age and certainly younger, I mean, from a cultural standpoint, what Madden has meant for NFL fandom and knowing kids love video games, all that. But Madden, and I can remember being 13 or 14 years old when I really started playing it on the regular. Guys would have injuries and they would be out, and it would say they were out 3 games. And then when they came back, they were just themselves again, right? I mean, you didn't even think twice about it. It's like, oh, I can't even remember what injury it was. It's not a light switch, it's a dial. Now certain injuries, hey, when someone comes back, rarely is there a lingering effect, and then they're off and running, and it's fine. But a lot of these injuries, it lingers, and they're going to feel soreness, and they're not necessarily going to be right. And I just, not talking about pitcher arm injuries because that's a little bit of a different category, but Jordan Westburg, for example, he's now at the point that the last few days he has shed the splint and is actually starting to do some light throwing. He's been doing kind of taking one-handed grounders for a while. I mean, he's been doing as much as he can to stay in it, but he's going to get to a point where he's cleared to start swinging and all of that. And I'm not at all suggesting that the fracture will not be fully healed when this time comes, but he'll feel soreness, and it's going to be a matter of managing that and seeing how effective he can be and how much like Jordan Westburg he can be. But that doesn't mean that he's going to feel 100%, truly 100% at all the rest of the year. I mean, he's probably going to feel that from time to time, right? It doesn't mean he can't be effective, but that's part of it. It really is a dial, right? It's not like rehab, 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 rehab. Perfect. Never have to do anything again. I'm fine. I'm golden, right? I mean, it's not that way. There's a lot of maintenance involved with all of these injuries. So I'm not saying that to make it an excuse or to be doom and gloom, but it's part of the picture. So when you're looking at at him, or you're looking at, I mean, Ramon Arias, who knows? Again, when you're still on crutches a few days after it happens, that's making me wonder if he's going to be back. I mean, we don't know. They haven't said. But, Dean Kramer threw a side session on Wednesday. I think he's trying to avoid the IL. You can backdate 3 days. I don't know if he's making his start this weekend or if they try to bump it back a couple days and he makes his start, for not the Tampa series, but the series right after that. What, again, at Boston, early next week, or he might go on the IL and then you're making a move. So, I mean, there's a lot going on here. And to your point, I think most of it's been positive. Ramon Arias recent injury aside, I mean, these guys are increasing their activity level. Jacob Webb, not a good, a terrible statistical rehab outing for Bowie on Wednesday night. But I looked at the box score, inherited runner score, different things like that. I mean, wasn't disaster, but certainly wasn't great. Do you want to give him one more, or is he ready to go? So you're going to be getting guys back, and you try to integrate them in where appropriate. And, in the case of Danny Coulomb, when he comes back, is he going to be pitching the 8th or 9th inning just like that? Do you try to ease him in for at least 1 or 2 outings? A lot of that's going to depend on how the rest of the bullpen looks at that point in time. So it's very much a moving target. All of these plans are still in pencil. As Brandon Hyde alluded to the other day, you're at the point in the season now where you are running out of games, whether you're talking about rehab assignments at Norfolk or just games on the regular season schedule, that if any of these guys has a setback, and I'll even throw, think back to last year with John Means, long before he came back, but when he was in the midst of his rehab, he ended up straining a back muscle going through rehab that slowed him down. Remember, he was supposed to be back June or July. That ended up being September as a result. So if anything, heaven forbid, anything like that happens to any of these guys, someone tweaks an ankle, something like that, they're probably done because you're just going to run out of time. So it's in pencil. There are positive, favorable, encouraging updates. These guys are getting closer and closer. I mean, like I said, Danny Coulomb throwing live batting practice, that's getting pretty close. Grayson Rodriguez throwing a bullpen where he's mixing in his off-speed stuff and not just throwing fastballs, that's getting pretty close. That doesn't mean next week, but you're hoping, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. Because again, you'd love to get these guys into at least a couple.
Dude, there's 3 weeks left in the season. There's 3, right? That's where we are right now.
I mean, you don't want Grayson Rodriguez going from throwing bullpens to starting game 3, right? I mean,
well, it is getting late early, but the other part of this is they just keep winning games enough to win 1, lose 1, win 2, lose 1. Like first place every day. Still waking up first place the day the Ravens kick off the season. So and nobody's coming to get them in that way, and I don't think anybody's coming to get them in any 3-game starting pitching matchup either, right? Like, and if they get bounced, and we'll all look back and say they had all these injuries. I would just say you gave me a hell of an infirmary there, right? Like that whole list, and you ended with Webb, who might be the first one to come back, right? Of all of these names that are there, to your point, they're not all going to be available on October 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or whatever when they have to go play baseball. Some of them might, but all of them won't be. You better make sure it's Westberg. You better make sure it's Rodriguez. You know what I mean? Like the really key guys. No offense to any of those guys that are going to pitch an inning or bullpen guys or whatever, but man, you need 5 innings out of Rodriguez in game 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. You need Kramer to be right. You're going to need innings out of him, and I think he'll be okay. I mean, that thing that happened to him, it's awful. I think he'll be okay. By then, I'm worried about by then. Everything for me now is who's starting game 1? Who's starting game 1? We don't even know that because our game 1 guy's a mess. Whatever protection that I saw Mick Jagger and Keith Richards have down in Buenos Aires when they erected this sort of SWAT thing around the hotel when I was down there 20, put that around Eflin, because we can't have anything happen to him, bubble wrap him, but he's got to go out and start, right, and stay sharp and all of these things. Luke, we're going to talk football. We'll get to that. We're going to do baseball here with all this. The bats thing, do you want to yell about that a little bit more? Because, like, when they do lose, even when it's, 9 to whatever, when the bats don't awaken, and this is this has been a problem for a couple months, much more so than we have a couple of injuries or this or that. They just there's not a level of consistency about them hitting the ball that they better figure that part out into October, because I'd hate to see them losing games 9-1 in the playoffs because they're not hitting the ball in game 3, you know?
Yeah, well, if you're giving up 9 runs, that's different. If you're losing 4-1, right, or something like that. Look, we've talked about this. Do they need to be more consistent? Absolutely. I mean, August was rough. Although I'll continue to point this out because people don't want to look at statistics, and stats are for nerds. Who are the
Well, it
offenses
involves
that you?
math, dude. You know what I mean?
Well, but
I wrote
but
a
my
book
point.
that involved reading they do. So yeah, there is a point where you just see the games, and then there's the statistical part where I'm not a dummy, but I get overwhelmed by how much information. And I think Ben and Kevin and a lot of people in the media do a really good job, and you too, of like trying to say it's not as bad as you think it
It's
is, right?
not.
And that's where you
It's
want to be
not.
with it, right? Even though it looks ugly, and the friggin' errors are the amazing. That's the part where
Sure.
you're like throwing the ball into center field, like that's crazy. But the hitting part of this, I still hold some level of confidence that they can hit their way to a World Series and pitch well enough to hold some water against other meet. They're not going to see Glavine, Smoltz, and Avery next month. They're not.
I mean, it's just you look at the rest of the American League field, and you just say, look, August was really rough. I get that. I agree with that. I talked a lot about it. I wrote a lot about it. I mean, it needed to be better. But for all the hand wringing about how bad their offense is, there are two teams in the American League who've scored 700 plus runs this year: the Orioles and the Yankees. I mean, so who are all these other offenses that everyone wants the Orioles to be more like? Well, they don't score as many runs as the Orioles. So last time I checked, you don't need to be a Saber Met. You don't need to be Bill James to figure out that the idea is to have more runs than the other team. Now, run prevention and their defense, yeah, I'll hear that. Their defense has been mediocre. We've talked a lot about that as well. So it needs to be more consistent. I've talked a lot about Adley Rutschman. We talked about Gunnar Henderson having a not so great August. Gunnar Henderson's looked fantastic again and has come on. We've talked about Anthony Santander and the year that he's had. They're missing Jordan Westberg, Colton Cowser, who, by the way, is very likely going to be AL Rookie of the Year. He's up and down and he's inconsistent, but when he's going, boy, you love having him. So a lot of this again goes back to how are all these guys doing come the first week of October? I mean, it sounds dismissive, and I don't say that to mean that the next month doesn't matter, because of course it does.
And how many
And you're
times you
trying.
said that about Lamar and the Ravens over the next 4 months? It
Sure.
just does. It's like Bill Murray and meatballs. It just doesn't matter. And I feel that way about September. And maybe that's why the place is sleepy and there's not a million people down there to see the worst team in modern history,
Well,
even on a beautiful night. Because like the playoff ticket, if you've got $50 laying around right now, you kind of want to put it toward game 2 if you can make. I mean, literally, I think there's a little of that. Raven tickets next week, and like there's a little bit of these games don't matter as much, and the big games are happening at Yankee Stadium. Those games are here. I think it'll be different. I think our fans can go up there. Be 20,000 empty seats in Yankee Stadium too if you want to go up there in the middle of the week too. Pretty good idea for you and me. New York's nice this time of year. It's pre-fall. I got some spots, but I can't get as worked up about any of this as I can Lamar and the Chiefs on Thursday or the Raiders. Like I'm not. They're not playing key games right now. They're just trying to get healthy. And I think the healthy reports and the day-to-day of the grapefruit meets pumpkin league. I call this the pumpkin league. It's important. It's good. We need it. We need to win every other one, at least for a little while here. But getting the guys healthy, that's our report every day. In addition to let's not give up 9 runs and score 1 and get 3 hits and throw the ball around.
no question, no question. But again, you look at the landscape of the American League. The Orioles, through the end of the White Sox series, even with an ugly loss to the worst team ever. I mean, they're awful, but they were going to win another game at some point. And as I mentioned, the Yankees a few weeks back, they lost a game to the White Sox. It does happen. You don't like it, but you move on. It still only counts as one, even though maybe it should count for 2 or 3. I don't know. I'll let other people decide that. But you just look at the landscape. Yankees, they've been doing the same thing, right? 2.5 weeks ago, it felt like maybe the Yankees, and I think some people were even wondering, is this the time they're going to start to take off? Baltimore's really scuffling, all that. I listened to MLB Network Radio a good bit. They were talking about that possibility. Yankees have been mediocre since then. Cleveland, mediocre over the last 10 games, 5-5. Houston, I think you made an interesting point because you talked about, we were talking about it with the Red Sox and how you see these teams that might have a surge right before the All-Star break, and the Red Sox certainly did that, and then you see them fall off. I'm not suggesting Houston's falling off, and I think Houston is still the team that has the most impressive pedigree out of anyone in that AL field because they've done it and they've been in the World Series and all that.
And that's what
But
Barry Bloom came on and said. He's like, Yankees can't beat the Astros. They're kryptonite, all that. Watch out for the Astros because they've been there before, right?
no doubt. However, what I will say is they have had to expend so much energy just getting back to the point where they are now. And you've seen them the last couple of weeks. Now, they've had some winning streaks, and you think, oh, wow, they're ready to take off. And then they go 5-5, or they lose 2 series in a row, or something like that. Point is, they're not winning 100 games, and they've already lost 64, through entering Thursday's play. So it just speaks to there are no dominant teams here. And you do the math. I don't care whether you are adamant that it's not going to be the Orioles or whatever. Someone in the American League will get through the tournament, get through the bracket, and emerge as the AL pennant winner and play in the World Series.
And
so
it's going to be about scrappy
game
5s and 6s and sloppy starting pitching and maybe bad weather. And it's going to be all of that. It's October, man. It's going to be short rest and weird game times and shadow, and it's going to be about James McCann hitting a 2-run homer in the 8th. You know what I mean? It's all, that's what it is. It's Tito Landrum, right? And we'll talk about all of this, but I'm heartened as we sit here, no matter what happens this weekend or even what the Ravens do on Thursday night. I'm heartened that they're going to play baseball in October and that we're at least getting some good news on some of these players that we can envision. Burns game 1, Eflin game 2. Burns game 1 because he's fixed, because he pitches well. Pitches well enough the next couple of weeks. Eflin game 2, Rodriguez game 3, knowing you might only get 3-4 innings out of him. You have Kramer ready. You have Suarez ready. You figure out where it is, and you get Westberg back in this lineup. I feel like a politician on this, but these are all the things. Mullins needs to be better, right? You know what? On the eve of a Ravens season, I'm gonna use one of John Harbaugh's favorites. Yes, so many, but one of his favorites is the best versions of themselves.
Yeah, sure. I'll continue to say it, though. They need to figure out that bullpen. Dean Kramer, look, as it pertains to October, will he pitch out of the bullpen in a long relief role? Potentially. They need to figure out the bullpen. Danny Coulomb, of the players we just mentioned, Danny Coulomb's way more important than many people realize because he's a lefty who can get right-handers out as well. And you need that. I'm going to continue to say it. They need 4 or 5 guys in their pen. Come the last week of September, you need to identify, all right, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Yennier Cano. Gregory Soto threw another scoreless inning on Wednesday night. Hey, there's another positive from a otherwise miserable game, losing to the White Sox, but he's starting to look better.
Keep going down the line till you make Kimbrel number 6 or 7, and then you throw him off, right? Like literally.
No, right? Craig Kimbrel at this point, he would not be in my October bullpen. It's that simple. Why? But because he used to be good. That's why I said to you the other day, he's running out of time. But the point is, and I'm not trying to pick on Kimbrel specifically, of that group of players that they have, who are the 4 or 5 that are going to be, okay, these are the guys. You've got off days, so you can throw relievers in just about every single postseason game. You have enough off days where that is very reasonable to do that. So who are the 4 or 5? Yeah, I get it. Believe me. You want Eflin to go as deep as possible. You want Burns to go as deep as possible. You want Grayson Rodriguez to be able to go as deep as possible. But when I say as deep as possible in a 2024 modern day postseason game, that's usually not much more than 6, right? That's how the game operates.
103 pitches on October 12th. The shadows falling.
Yeah.
6th inning, games 3-2. The bullpen better be there. At some point,
it's got to be there. It's got to be there. We can talk.
I love that we're talking about this. Is fun, man. I've known you 15 years. We don't get to talk like this. This is. By the way, you said something because we can break it off, and I'll give you your final, kumbaya and all this. But you mentioned something about Madden football. There were injuries in Madden football. What?
Yeah. In fact, see, I'm old enough to remember people now. I mean, you got PS5 and the graphics are unbelievable and all that. I haven't played a video game other than I have like an old school Nintendo, like one of the, in recent years
All
they've
these
kind
kids
of done
play
some
like Zay
retro
Flowers
stuff.
and Lamar Jackson. That is their cornhole, right? Kind of, sort of, for some of these young kids.
These guys still do stuff like that too. But yeah, I mean, Lamar Jackson loves playing video games. So, I mean, and he's not alone. Most of these guys in their 20s love playing video games. But I can remember playing the Sega
Sounds like
Genesis.
something out of Slapshot to me, but go ahead. Go right
I
ahead.
can
Keep going.
I can rem- I can remember playing the Sega Genesis version of Madden. It was probably like Madden 97, something like that. Right when the Ravens became a thing, so it was exciting having the Ravens in a game. But I can remember a player would get hurt. There'd be the little graphic of him writhing in agony on the field, and they would literally have the graphic of an ambulance come out. Even if a guy had a sprained wrist or something like that, an ambulance would come out on the field, and they would just, then they drive off. I mean,
Just
it
what
was
every
so
kid needed to
cheesy.
see, right?
That is so cheap. I mean, again, the graphics are
All
so
right, so hold
whatever.
on, dude. I'm older than you, and I've been going through this all week with people older than me, like Viviano, who's in retirement. At some point, I'll find Jamie Costello, drag him on here too. Dude, when I was a kid, we had the little metallic football, kind of looked like the 2018 Ravens when Lamar took over. It just goes. Zzz. So you're familiar with that? Then, dude, 1979, Scott Medora, who was the one that gave me my Oiler cap that you can buy on eBay now, which is really kind of cool. I had my Oiler cap that we got at the Sears and Roebuck in 1979. And this is when the Coleco handheld game came out with the little red dots where you could pass or run. And I became very proficient in this. Before Pac-Man, like right on the eve of Pac-Man, sort of Asteroids was happening and Breakout was happening. Not anywhere near Donkey Kong yet, or like a Burger Time, not nowhere in that, and certainly no joystick Atari. That kind of came a little bit later. But that little, you had, and then you had the baseball game where you pitch and hit, and you had to get your little fingers in there and do that thing, and then battery would and it would literally just do that, it would just die. And so that's what I had when I was a kid. So I would think that Lamar Jackson, in addition to having, his own real version of football, I did not know I'll say this, there were no injuries in Stratomatic. Stratomatic, you know what I mean? Greg Nettles never got hurt. He played. So even the guys that did get hurt played. It's Stratomatic. You got 162 out of everybody, whether you wanted it or not. So I don't know. You think when I get older, I'm going to want to play video games or read Hemingway? What do you think?
Probably read.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm actually writing this week instead of reading. Anything else you want to drop about the Orioles before the weekend? Because we're going to do so much football here.
No, I mean, other than, Ray's coming in. I mean, they've continued to hover around 500. I think, again, the Kramer, I know going into the off day, it was still TBA. The Kramer injury or status was kind of muddying things a little bit. I mean, you'd like to give Eflin an extra day, right? Coming back. So, we'll see how that looks, but take 2 out of 3. Take 2 out of 3, take 2 out of 3, take 2 out of 3. I mean, if they keep doing that, based on what I see from the Yankees, that's going to have them in a good spot, at least by the time they get to the Bronx for that series, the last week of the season. So, just move on. Ugly loss to the White Sox. Yeah, should count for 2, but it doesn't. So that's good. And just a matter of these guys continuing to get healthy, getting these positive updates, and fingers crossed that they get most of them back, and that most of them look like themselves when they do come back.
Luke Jones is doing double duty. I am writing about how I'm doing my duty. So go read it. It's at a Baltimore Positive. It's not all positive, but it's honest. It's truthful. It comes with character and integrity. It comes with a lot of text messages and a lot of evidence and a lot of different things. But Luke will be covering the games. I will be writing about the games, covering the games, having oysters every single day for the next 26 days. I want to thank just everybody that's a sponsor, everybody that's been involved in this, but starting with our friend Marcella and her crew over at Coco's on Wednesday. They actually put oysters on their menu. I purposely did the Crab Cave tour there thinking we'd start the oyster tour with John Shields on Thursday. And it's all brought to you by our friends at Curio Wellness. 26 years. I'm working on the 26. I'm fighting with Jessica about the oyster crab thing. You can imagine on the 26. We're going to get it right this week. We're going to have a new logo. And our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions. I have the hat around here and a bottle of water and all that stuff for Doug and everybody. Keeps my water clean. For all of our sponsors, from Wise Markets and Liberty Pure and our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I have a handful of Gold Rush 7s that I will have next week at Cooper's. Crab Cake Tour is the 13th on Friday. Friday the 13th. How about that? Dave Sheinen's going to join us, as well as Chad Wiesling, one of my favorites, who's an NFL agent who lives in Canton, former Chia Terp. So we're going to do that next Friday at Cooper's. Now, all of that's brought to you by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care. Wow, Ravens season. We waited all this time. Now, finally, it's here. And we still have a baseball problem. We're WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore. Positive. Don't I look good in my El Guapo shirt? Got a nice burrito there last week.